Hello and welcome to the Farm Traveler Podcast. Today our guest is Paul Goeringer. He is a Maryland Extension agent and he's going to talk to us today about some legal issues that Maryland farmers are facing, how Maryland farmers deal with certain environmental regulations dealing with Chesapeake Bay area, and he's also going to talk to us about what farmers can do to pass on their farms to the next generation. Little side note, this is episode 8, and we are averaging about 55 to 60 listens per episode, which is really cool. So thank you for listening, whether you're in your car, working out, whatever you're doing. Really appreciate it. Thank you, and continue to share the podcast, listen to it, tell your friends, leave a review on iTunes. It helps us out a ton. But seriously, just keep listening. Really glad we're getting those farmer stories out there, and more people are listening. So thank you, and hope you enjoy episode 8 with Paul Goeringer. Thanks. All right, well, welcome to the Farm Traveler Podcast, Paul Goeringer. You are a Maryland Extension agent, so kind of walk us through what your job is as a Maryland Extension agent.
Okay, yeah, so thanks for having me on, Trevor. My job is I'm a state specialist in basically law, and I'm not based in a county office. I'm based on campus in the Department of Ag and Resource Economics here at the University of Maryland. And my job is more or less to go out and work with producers to have them better understand legal issues that sort of impact their farms, whether it be anything from transitioning the farm to the next generation, starting the farm for the first time, to dealing with county zoning and planning, to environmental regs. We're lucky here in the state. We have state funding for a group called the Ag Law Education Initiative, which I'm also a part of, and we sort of have a whole team that work together to develop these resources to help farmers do extension.
Okay, cool. So what are some of the main ag industries in Maryland that you kind of work with?
The biggest issue, or the biggest industry, is the poultry industry, probably with the equine industry up there neck and neck together. I can't remember who's first and who's second. But we have a lot of contract growers with poultry, corn and soybean growers, a few dairies, and then a large number of specialty crop growers around the state. Because if you think about it, we have DC, Baltimore, Philly, you name the metro area on the East Coast that's within, a couple hours drive of here, and producers are selling to those consumers in those markets, specialty crops.
Gotcha. Now, how long have you been working there in Maryland?
6.5 years.
Okay. I noticed kind of across the country, there's been this whole kind of farm to table movement. Have you kind of seen, at least in Maryland, with all those local farmers, that they've been trying to get their produce more and more to the big suburban areas like Baltimore, DC? Have you noticed that?
Yes, I have noticed it. We've done a lot of work with growers that are starting community-supported ag CSA memberships with their farms. Agritourism's big, with people trying to bring, city people out maybe an hour from DC or Baltimore to experience the farm. So yeah, we've had a lot of growers that have taken a specific interest in that, and a lot of non-traditional people coming into ag to take advantage of that as well.
Gotcha. That's really cool. Yeah, a lot of producers that we've interviewed they've said that they've been trying to use social media and agritourism as much as they can. So that's really cool to hear. Now, you touched base that you work on a lot of legal issues with farmers. Talk us through that, and what are some of the bigger legal issues that you've had to deal with?
It depends on the day of the week as to what the biggest legal issue is, and also what's in the news, it seems like at times. But mainly right now, the biggest ones that I work with are estate planning, which is always something people don't want to do, but then they have to do it at some point. So that has always been kind of one of the driving issues that I deal with on a regular basis. If you've seen in the news the North Carolina hog farm litigation, With us having a large number of poultry farms in the state, those growers are concerned about those type of lawsuits coming to Maryland. So we have to work with those growers to help them understand how right to farm laws work, but at the same time deal a lot with environmental laws. The Chesapeake Bay is more or less in the middle of the state, and it's one of these bodies of water that we do want to protect as a nation. So we deal with a large number of environmental regulations and laws that sort of help keep the Chesapeake Bay clean, whether you're a homeowner down to farmers and how they put nutrients on a field and that type of stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm sure the Chesapeake Bay is a huge hub and just a huge environmental issue. What have you noticed in the past couple of years that has kind of been going towards regulations in the ag industry to kind of protect that body of water?
I would say it's the regulations I've seen and sort of the move I've seen is towards more dealing with nutrient management, trying to make sure that the right amount of nutrients are going on when needed to kind of protect runoff and keep it from going into the bay or bodies of water that will eventually hit the bay. That's where we've seen a lot of the regulations coming down. I think this year before the General Assembly, the Maryland General Assembly, there's at least one bill to sort of more enforce how nutrient management is taking place in the state. And then at the same time, it's a lot, I mean, poultry farms create a lot of waste, is then trying to figure out where does all that waste go and sort of some of the regulations related to how do we transport, chicken manure around the state to make sure it's going to the right locations and it's not going to a farm or a location that's oversaturated with certain nutrients. And I would say looking at the country as a whole, one of the areas of the country that's moving slightly more towards the way Maryland is being regulated is if you look at Lake Erie, some of the regulations that are being moved towards Lake Erie to protect Lake Erie are starting to reflect some of the stuff that's been seen in the Chesapeake Bay.
Gotcha. Yeah, down here in Florida, we've had a lot of that too. I mean, we're surrounded 3/4 of the state by water. We've got Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades, and there's been a lot of talk about runoff going into the Okeechobee and the Bay, or not the Bay, but the Gulf. And so we know how that feels to have to deal with all that stuff, just like in the Chesapeake Bay area.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys have a lot to deal with down there too, from what I read in the news.
Yeah, and I've talked to a few farmers, and they've said that a lot of people don't realize that they have got to check their water quality and their runoff and make sure it's. I think one of the producers we talked to said it's got to be a certain percentage, like billion per particle or something like that, and that the quality of the water that they have to return back into the aquifer or back wherever has got to be a higher purity than bottled water. And I mean, that's just crazy. But yeah, a lot of the times
Wow.
you just, yeah, but anytime anybody that's not involved in agriculture, they're like, oh, the algae blooms are only because of agriculture, and it's not because of runoff from urban areas where you've got people just putting fertilizer in their lawns and not worrying about it. So that's very interesting. So what you talked about that you work with farmers to kind of help them better figure out how to talk to their attorneys with issues. What's some advice that you give to farmers on how to effectively communicate with attorneys with any legal issues they might have?
Yeah, that's a good question. The first thing I always tell them to do is don't just sign up with the first attorney that you talk to. Talk to a couple. It's like any other sort of, if you're going to hire an accountant or a doctor, you're not just going to go in and hire the first one you talk to. In some cases you might, but it's really getting to talk to them because they're going to be dealing with you potentially on, either a daily basis, a weekly basis, depending on what the issue is. If you're going to court, it's going to be, you're going to have constant communication with them. So you want to make sure you can work with them. I think that's the biggest thing that people don't think about is they may hear this person's good, and then just decide because their neighbors gave them a reference, they hire them, but they may not be a good fit personally personality-wise for them. So the biggest thing I always tell people is to communicate, then make sure they understand how they're going to have to pay the attorney. Almost every attorney I talk to, and farmer, anyone who's ever had to hire an attorney, almost all the issues boil down to, and the disputes and the relationship arise from, I didn't understand how I was going to pay this person, or from the attorney's standpoint, well, I didn't get paid on time, and this person didn't want to pay me. So it's always making sure they're aware of how they're going to pay, what's going to be billed, what's not going to be billed, so they can maximize sort of how much money they're going to spend and make sure that they don't overspend money on their legal issue. And then the other big thing that kind of goes back to making sure you can work with the person is, how do they like to communicate and how do you like to communicate? You know, it's making sure that in the end, if the attorney doesn't want to pick up the phone and doesn't want to talk to you, but will shoot you an email because that's what they have the time in the day to do, are you comfortable getting an email? Do you know how to send an email? I mean, that sometimes is an issue depending on age. Or are they going to text you, or do you want to text them? So it's just making sure that, and then sort of talking to them at the same time to make sure, do they have the expertise to even be handling the issue that I'm presenting them with? If they're the local attorney in a small town, they may not have the environmental law background to be able to handle an environmental law problem, and you may have to go to a bigger city to try to find that attorney from a bigger firm and spend a little bit more money, but it may be beneficial to you in the long run to do that and make sure that you're getting someone who's an expert to sort of handle the problem, and you're not just paying someone for on-the-job training that may not be what you want in the end.
Right. Now, people outside the industry might be curious as to, one, why exactly would a farmer be sued? And also, on the other point, what are some other instances to when a farmer would need legal advice or legal counsel? So walk us through that.
Okay, so I'll take the second one first, and I can talk about the first one last. So, I mean, if you think about it, I don't know how it is in Florida, and I'm originally from Oklahoma, and I know how it is in Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, if you want to build a barn and put it up for your farm, you just go out and build a barn. Maryland, if you want to put a barn up on your farm, you need to make sure you're going through zoning and planning. You get the plans approved. You do everything like you're building a home in a city in other states. So part of it may be you just need the attorney to walk you through zoning and planning to make sure you understand what you need to do exactly to get your building built. Other issues may be you got to get a will written. You need help complying with environmental laws in some case, and there may not be just a consultant, a farm management person you can deal with that can help you with those. So it's just any sort of host of issues that would normally pop up in a business you may actually need an attorney for at some point. With Maryland being a little bit more regulated than other states, the issues where you might need an attorney would pop up more and more here than they may in other states. As it comes to getting sued, part of the issue is if we look at, say, what's going on with hog farms in North Carolina and Iowa and a few other states where there's just nuisance lawsuits going on, where neighbors are claiming that the animal operations themselves are nuisances. We could have cases, here where a neighbor's claiming the farmer is a nuisance. Cases where potentially the state or neighbor are claiming that the farm violated environmental laws, didn't follow zoning and planning, or just the normal, I have an agritourism operation and my kid got bit by, the dairy cow or the pig that they were able to pet while they were out on the farm, and now I'm going to sue you. So it could just be any sort of common lawsuit, but at the same time, it could be areas where they're potentially claims that they're violating state or federal environmental laws where they could be sued.
Gotcha. Yeah, it definitely seems like there's a lot of stuff you could get sued over. I can imagine now, especially given all the attention in social media and just how political people get. I can't imagine having an agritourism operation and having people pet livestock, and because I'm honestly not shocked they don't see that in the news more often. Oh, a cow bit my daughter's finger and it swelled up, so I'm going to sue you. Like, well, you should know that.
Yeah, yeah, you should know that. Or think about what are some of the common bacteria and viruses you could get from not washing your hands. If the kid just accidentally puts their hand on something and puts it in their mouth, they could get E. coli or something
Yeah,
just from
exactly.
walking through the farm. And it's like, what? No.
We told you to wash your hands before and after, but you didn't listen, so it's your fault, not ours.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about a second ago legal advice for giving wills to farmers, and you've mentioned that one of the things you do is kind of talking to farmers on how to pass their farm on to the next generation. Kind of walk us through that. What exactly do you tell farmers how to pass their farm on, and what's some stuff you've done concerning that?
Okay. So the biggest thing, I think myself and other people that have do this type of stuff is always make sure that the family is on the same page. That if the kids, nobody wants the farm, then why are you going to pass the farm on to, one kid to run if they don't want it? So make sure that sort of everybody's on the same page and we all know what everybody's life goals are when this initial meeting happens. And then try to figure out a way at that point that works for you to how you're going to slowly start moving management, what other decisions need to be made towards that next generation, and slowly start doing it over the course of your life to where maybe the farm will be successful down the road once you're no longer a part of it. Because part of the problem is how many farmers want to retire. There's really nobody that wants to retire sometimes from this profession. They all expect they're going to continue to do it until the day they die. That may not always be the best avenue that we can have, especially if we want managers to take over and be able to manage a farm and people with that management experience. So it may be trying to figure out, how do I continue to stay active in the farm, but I give up some of the management control. Oddly, I just got to go to a conference out of the country and in Australia, and one of the tours we were able to do on it, and we were able to select what tours we did. I did a farm succession tour, and it was very interesting listening to the three farmers, or the three farm families we talked about, where, both, I think in all three cases, the dads decided, at 65, I'm retiring, and this is your problem. And all of them held true to that. They retired. Sons took over. For the most part, it seemed like the operations were growing, and the dads were just hired hands at that point who came in and, did what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it. And there were other people that the sons relied on, but, dad may show up and help work so many hours a day and then take off for the rest of the day. So I think what passing it on to the next generation, it's sort of taking it from just the idea of, okay, this thing's going to be passed on at my death, to more, how do we do it over the course of the life of the current farm manager to make sure that the next farm manager has the skills in place to be able to handle the operation. And it may be better to have, dad there to answer questions during that period of time than all of a sudden thrust it upon the next generation and no one there to help answer the questions as to why certain decisions were made.
Right. Now, could you give us like a rough percentage as to how many farms in Maryland are family owned, they've been family owned, and they will continue to be family owned? Just like a rough estimate, if you could.
If I remember correctly from the last census, it's around 80%.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. Yeah. A lot of people, that's one thing I'm trying to do with this podcast, is just kind of inform consumers that most farms are family owned and operated. They always think, oh, it's big agro is taking over all the food. But no, like, that's really cool that in Maryland, it's 80% family owned and operated. That's really cool.
Yeah. And I think that's what the census said. Yeah. I mean, and you think about, even though we have contracts with Purdue, Tyson, I'm trying to think who the other contract growers are in the state for poultry, almost all of them are, family-owned farms that contract with those companies to grow chickens. So that would be about the only thing where maybe corporate would get involved.
Right. That's pretty cool. Well, Paul, this has been really cool to talk about, man, a whole bunch of stuff. The ag industry in Maryland, legal advice for farmers, passing on farms to the next generation. If people want to reach out for you, if farmers in Maryland want to reach out with you and learn more about all the advice you have, how could they get in contact with you, or where can they go to learn more about Maryland Extension?
They can go for Maryland Extension. They can go to extension.umd.edu, and that will bring them to University of Maryland Extension's homepage. To find me and stuff I do, I mean, I'm on social media. My Twitter is at @aglawpaul. For our law stuff, we're funded a little different, so our stuff's not actually under the University of Maryland Extension website. We have a page there that will eventually get you to us, but we are at umaglaw.org, and that will get you to me and everyone else who works on the issues in the state.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Paul, thanks for being on the podcast, man. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.